Hello everyone, exciting couple days for the player pool of the U.S. men's national team. We have a September call-up for games against Oman and Uzbekistan. By the way, before we get into that, before we get into everything, just a reminder, that was going to be Argentina-Brazil, that window. Could you imagine right now we're a week away from the USA playing Argentina and Brazil? Didn't happen. We get Oman and Uzbekistan, which on the surface is good because it's not Panama or, I'm not taking a shot at Panama, or El Salvador, not taking a shot at El Salvador. It's just we play them so much. Let's get a different look. We'll get some teams from a different federation, the Asian Football Federation. Maybe, who knows, an expanded World Cup, you could draw a team like Oman or Uzbekistan. So it's not wasted. And it will be challenging. But it could have been Argentina-Brazil. Also want to mention the incredible achievement of 10, I believe, American players making the Champions League group stages. There's going to be different tiers. It's not going to be like it was in 2021, where we had an American win it. We had another one in the final, Zach Steffen. But it's not bad. And we might have this incredible run with Christian Pulisic and Yunus Musa in AC Milan, who I think could make a really good run. Before they arrived, they made the semifinals. It could be another good tournament for the Serie A clubs. I will say this, though. The group stages are not going to be that enticing. I know. They rarely are. And the haves and the have-nots are pretty determined in these groups, right? Which I was hoping there'd be less of a hard line. You know, in 32 teams, I would figure you would have at least 25 or 26 that had a shot of making the round of 16. The reality is we only have like 20, 22. The rest are just filling it. It's just weird that there's not a more competitive, but it's not weird. It's just the way it is. Maybe they have to get more teams from the Premier League, etc. But there was one group that I could argue might be the best group in the history of the Champions League. And it's Milan's group. It is Group F. There it is. Not only with Milan, but you have PSG, Borussia Dortmund, and Newcastle United. All four could win the group. All four could finish last. All 6 games in that group are going to be compelling. They're going to be tightly contested. I still think PSG is the best there, although we'll see what happens with Kylian Mbappe. But that's an incredible group. We just don't see groups like that. Maybe all 4 could win it. Not Dortmund. Let's just say maybe all 4 could make a semifinal. Not Dortmund. They did. Yeah, Dortmund had a nice run. Let's not rule them out. Very exciting. Let's get to the U.S. men's national team roster. But before we do that, we'll tell you what's going to happen here today on the Soccer OG. Check out the Soccer OG podcast, just published. So after this, go to the podcast where you get your podcasts, where podcasts are available. I will be joined by Fox Sports' Doug McIntyre. We'll talk about the roster. He has a really interesting spin on what's happening with Gregg Berhalter. I'm also going to talk about how Messi is hitting a wall, and I don't think I'm almost definitive they're not going to make the playoffs, which would be a huge miss for MLS. You don't have Messi for that long, but Miami's not good enough. And we'll see what happens Sunday. I think LAFC is going to smash them. So we have that. I also want to have my a thought on Luis Rubiales in Spain, because the outrage that continues in this country, we've got to look at it a little differently. We've got to approach this a little differently because it's not getting results. It's not moving anything. So the Soccer OG podcast, like and subscribe us here on YouTube. Thanks for everyone who's checked out the videos. Check out YouTube videos that you haven't seen before. I have some evergreen topics there that you will enjoy. Let's get to the U.S. men's national team roster. This is what it looks like. 24 players that will be participating in games September the 9th against Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan, which is next to Kazakhstan. Remember, Borat used to make fun of Uzbekistan. He goes, bad Uzbekistan. That's in St. Louis, September the 12th, a Tuesday, against Oman in Minnesota. So that's going to be, it's going to be good. We have 2 games in October against Germany and Ghana, some November Nation League games. So this is it. And then 2024 hits us and we are rolling. We got the Copa America in our crosshairs up ahead. So the roster, 24 players, not too many arguments, right? We're not all up in arms with the players that are on there. There wasn't too many snubs. We'll get to the snubs in a minute. But Matt Turner, Ethan Horvath, Drake Callender one of two Inter Miami players. The Messi rub certainly paid off. We'll talk about Calendar and Benjamin Cremaschi, who also made it, and where he sits in the big picture, and should he be on this roster? Because there was more outrage about him making the roster, and it's just getting so fatigued. Everyone's got to be angry about something on Twitter or X or Instagram. Everyone's got to be angry. Really, there's not much to be angry about. This is very compelling. There are the 9 defenders. Christopher Lund, we'll talk about him a little bit. Miles Robinson made it. And one of 4 MLS players, including Cade Cowell, who made it as well. Midfielders and forwards, there it is. Christian Pulisic got a very strong team. You have 12 players that were there at the World Cup, so half the roster has World Cup experience. That's awesome. Tim Ream back from his broken arm. You have an average age of 23 years and 302 days, even with old man Tim Ream lifting that number. So it's still a very young team, although it has World Cup experience. This is what was expected. Now, a lot of you are like, oh no, he's going to pick Sebastian Lletget. This is also the return of Gregg Berhalter in charge of this team. We're going to talk about Gregg Berhalter and Gio Reyna, obviously, as well. This is the first time in charge. And people are going, oh, he's going to be... Well, I said this in the last OGs. I want to thank the likes of Jordan Mars and Aaron Long and DeAndre Yedlin and Christian Roldan, Sebastian Lletget. Those guys filled the gap. And this was going back to missing a World Cup in 2018. We missed that generation a bit. And these guys kind of filled the gap. They were part of that generation. But all of them, and guys like Kellen Acosta, they're not going to get called up again. Maybe for some tournaments outside, they're not getting called up. But they served a purpose. So everyone who was like going, the MLS community guys, they did us a great service. Because we weren't ready. We were still too young. And they allowed that transition. But I don't know if it was the goal. Maybe it was the goal to get to this team where you have players at a high level playing in Europe that are ready to go. They just needed to get some reps. They just needed to get some experience. They are getting that. I mean, Christian Pulisic has 60 caps now. So don't badmouth those guys. They did us a solid. And they got to live their dreams going to the World Cups in some of the situations. Jordan Morris, I don't think I mentioned him. But it's it. This roster tells you that their service has come, and we appreciate it, and now we're moving on. So all this, this narrative where you're going, here we go again, it's not going to happen. And I told you that back in the summer, in June and July. And there it is, clear as day. And it's got nothing to do with MLS, because MLS is still well represented. Jesus Ferreira not on there, but he's going to be in consideration for these World Cups. The Inter Miami guys are really interesting too, but that's just the big picture of things, where this was the direction we were always going to move in. So don't get all bent out of shape, all right? Except that this is a very good roster. The Benjamin Cremaschi, and Drake Calendar. Calendar deserved it because, we would look at the snubs really quickly. The big one to me was Georgi Mihalovic, and it's not really that big of a one. Everyone else is kind of injured that was not on this roster. Tyler Adams, Walker Zimmerman, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Taylor Booth, lesser degree, Josh Sargent, Gio Reyna, who's just returning, but it was too soon. And, I've heard some really good reports that if Gio Reyna was healthy, he would be on this roster. So when we get to the conversation about Berhalter and Reyna, keep that in mind. Because that's the one loose end that maybe not making it perfect for everyone. And I understand that. And it should be handled differently than it is. It's just the situation we're in. Zach Steffen not on there. You feel for him because he's just fallen off the cliff. It's not out of the realm, but he just needs a good fit. I'm curious to see. Paxton Aronson didn't make it. He was playing for Eintracht Frankfurt in some important games. His brother's an interesting one because he's not playing all that well going back to Leeds, but is he a guy that you just lock into this roster? I say no. I think our roster is getting that competitive. So we have those 10, 12 players that you feel like are untouchable. It's closer to 8 or 7 or 8. So it's an interesting group. We've seen these guys in the Champions League. Serginho Dest is in the ascendancy. So there's a lot to be excited about. And this is going to set a good table. Again, it could have been Argentina, Brazil, but there it is. So let's talk about the Inter Miami players. Because more outrage about Cremaschi being in there. And he shouldn't be in there on form. You know, Franco Panzio saying that, and I've touched it. You know, there's pressure from Argentina. They want to get Benjamin Cremaschi. They don't want to get him in, but maybe there'll be interest. There's no chance he'll play for Argentina. Zero chance. Probably a slim chance here. He's not as good as his contemporaries. But this is what this September camp is for. This is an incredible group of players. Everyone wants to play on this national team. Take a look at all the dual nationals. Flo Balogun told you he wants to be part of this team. Ricardo Pepi told you he wants to be part of this team because it's the place to be, right? It is. It's a national team in the ascendancy that made a World Cup round of 16. It's going to be hosting in 2026. Whether Berhalter's in charge or not, this group is special. And you want to be part of it. So Christopher Lund, who's a left back, I don't know much about him, plays at Palermo. He wants to swear allegiance to the U.S. We're going to get a look at him. Would a guy like Sam Vines or someone be upset who's playing for Antwerp now in the Champions League for not getting called up? Yeah, that could be a snub. But this is a good spot for Lund. And Cremaschi, I got no issue. I got no issue with Drake Callender. Drake Callender is here more on form, I think. He has proven to be a very good goalkeeper, probably with an eye in Europe very soon. And Cremaschi is just we'll see what it's at. So we'll see where he's at. We'll have these conversations. A lot of people said he didn't make the under-20s. There's a report now coming out that he was going to be part of that under-20s. I could see him being part of that. So he gets a sniff. That's how it works. This is the process. So while he wouldn't have been my first choice, I'm not losing sleep about it. He's not going to play. This is just for him to get it. Remember, it's 24 players. 5, 6 guys maybe more aren't going to play at all. It's still going to be a competitive setup. You're not just getting guys in there. You want to play with that core and move it forward. So that is a big talking point for sure. And the same applies for Lund. There's a lot of familiarity, 6 sets of club teammates. I think Gregg Berhalter wants to build some chemistry in some areas as well. And when you look at what lies ahead, we're not far away from some really important stuff coming down the pike. So we move forward with all of that. No big issue with Snubs. And the guys that aren't here injured, expect to see them in October. Josh Sargent looks like it's going to be long-term, so that's very disappointing. But the other guys, and certainly Tyler Adams, ease him back in. And Gio Reyna is going to be there in October. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that a little bit. And I believe U.S. Soccer wanted Gio Reyna or wanted Gregg Berhalter to come out and address this. My guess is every network that covers U.S. Soccer has something. So I'm talking about Fox, Turner, CBS, probably ESPN, all the newspapers, all the carriers wanted to talk to Gregg Berhalter. They chose Vanity Fair. And that was probably selected by U.S. Soccer, handpicked, to have on a little bit off the grid and have this article where Gregg Berhalter airs it out. Now, if anybody was going to speak with Gregg Berhalter, they're going to have to ask about Gio Reyna. My guess is Gregg Berhalter didn't really want to, but he has to. And they asked him about here. He mentioned they haven't spoken. And that got everyone up in arms, which it probably should have. Now, should Gregg Berhalter have spoken with Gio Reyna between November of the World Cup and now? Yes. Is it going to be an uncomfortable conversation? 100%. Will he be better off once that's in his rearview mirror? Absolutely. Like all of us. Like we want to break up with a girlfriend or something. You know what I mean? You don't want to say it, but you know you got to do it. And the minute you do it, you're through. I'm sorry I used that example, but that's the first thing that came to mind. You got to get through that. It's about life. You've got to get through those uncomfortable positions. And I know Gregg Berhalter probably wants to talk about the group. And he has a great group. I'm very confident what this U.S. team could do. And I'm confident with Gregg Berhalter's leadership. I thought everything we heard and everything we did at the World Cup and what we heard from the players, and speaking specifically about Gio Reyna, let's go back to the beginning where the players weren't happy about how he was training. He started this in that sense. The players' guard is up. And I was speaking to Doug McIntyre, and I'll bring this part up and I'll circle back. So the big issue is they haven't spoken. But what if, this is Doug, because I thought it was brilliant what he said. What if the investigation finds out that Berhalter was there and they kick him out? And Gio Reyna comes back. All right, ding dong, the witch is dead. The rest of those players will not forget that. The ones, basically what we heard is all of them, the U.S. players who were in Berhalter's corner would not forget that. That may cause a bigger problem than worrying whether Gio Reyna and Gregg Berhalter have had a conversation. So don't get up in a tizzy about it. Again, should it have happened? Yes. Gregg Berhalter is going to make his life a lot easier once it's over because he's going to have to keep answering these questions, which is just dumb and stubborn. But the resentment could have been worse. I am convinced after hearing Doug say that it would have been worse. You got Gregg Berhalter was our guy. You got him fired. That won't sit well. I'm telling you, it would probably undercut Gio's chances with the national team. 100%. 100%. So the fact it ended this way could be a blessing in disguise. Now, everything we said, Gregg Berhalter should have addressed it, not handled it all well. But stop for a moment. Stop for a moment and think of what's going through Gregg Berhalter's head. What Gio Reyna's parents did was turn his world upside down for all of us to see. Put yourself in his shoes. I would be pissed. I would not want to talk to him. I would want to be in the same room with Gio Reyna. I'd be upset. Time goes by and you know you have to resolve this. You can't kick him out and say that because you can't. What you can do, as Gregg Berhalter, is maybe not have the relationship and have your assistants work. And he brought back BJ Callahan, all those guys. So he's bringing in familiar faces, which is good. We want it to be familiar. And we've seen these relationships between head coaches and star players where they're not eye to eye, but you find different ways to build up that player and you get to do your work where you don't have maybe the greatest relationship. It's been going on in every sport, in every league, in the Premier League, in the NBA, in the NFL. That happens all the time with players and coaches not seeing eye to eye. So don't give Gregg the grief where others didn't. Now, keep in mind that for Gregg Berhalter, this was a seismic shake in his life. And the investigation put him off the hook and put it on the Reynas. They should have never done this. I would imagine, I would be a basket case. Now they got to do it. He got off the hook because he didn't call him in September. And now this mediation, you get mediation because it's a delicate situation. Everyone just feels like you walk into these situations. You guys are naive for saying that. It will happen. I hope it gets resolved. If it keeps going on, we got a big problem, but we will see. But don't get up and out of shape. Take a deep breath. This is all good. We got 10 guys in the Champions League. We got our September roster. We have October. We have players kicking tail in Europe. We're on the up and up. U.S. soccer. Enjoy this time. Enjoy the games. We'll be back here on the Soccer OG. Check out the Soccer OG podcast where all podcasts are available. Like and subscribe us here. We'll see you soon.